Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Comic Book Wednesday. This is an epic world's finest collaboration between Michael K. Vaughan and myself, where we combine the forces of stately Vaughan Manor and Hyde Cottage to talk about the comic books on which we have wasted such a large part of our lives. And it started out with an event on Michael's channel, where he was going through his Marvel Epic collections. Marvel's full-color paperback reprint collection series that's quite good, quite interesting. You never know quite what you're going to get. It doesn't have the straightforward chronological progression of Marvel's Masterwork series. And I saw that feature and just horned my way in, and now Michael and I are doing it together, and we are branching out from the Epic collections to go all over in Marvel and DC. But since it was originally Michael's idea, I let him have the driver's seat. He's the one who picks what we will talk about week by week. And sometimes that's a lot of fun. We share some taste in common, but other times, Michael can pick things that, well, it's all interesting in its way. This week is one of those. This is a very, very qualified read. Sometimes we pick things that I can wholeheartedly recommend to you. Quite a few Epic collections I can wholeheartedly recommend to you. This thing I really can't. I've got a cover here to the first or one of the early collections. This was a 12-issue miniseries called Marvel Superheroes Secret Wars. And this is the famous cover to the first issue. The cover is drawn by an artist named Mike Zeck, who can be very talented in spurts of about 17 minutes at a time. And I saw this cover, in the comic shop and was ripped right away. I was irritated with the cover. Before I even opened the book and read the first issue, I was irritated. Can you tell me why? Can you tell me why? I see the Fantastic Four in the person of the Thing and the Human Torch. I see the X-Men. I see Captain America. I see Iron Man. I see the Hulk. I see Spider-Man. Anyone missing? Thor is missing. Thor is missing. Thor is missing from the cover. But Thor is not missing from the book. Doctor Strange, very pointedly, is missing from the book, but Thor is not. And this is a story, if you want to call it that, that's being very generous. This is a gimmick, really, but it was written by Jim Shooter, who was the massive writerly power at Marvel and DC. For a long time, he was a major figure to contend with. And he was approached by Mattel, the toy company, in the early 1980s. This came out in 1984. He was approached by them with a modest proposal. Give us a comic book that stirs up interest in these very marketable characters, and we will give you gigantic burlap sacks full of money. And Shooter delivered. He delivered Marvel's Secret Wars. This is the story of a character named the Beyonder, who is from beyond. He is a god, basically. He's omnipotent in every way, far, far, far more powerful than any other character that in the Marvel multiverse, I guess. And who decides in the run-up to these and all of these various comic books to set up archways that will lure heroes to go through them, at which point they will enter his domain. The Beyonder is all-powerful. Why he does that, I have no idea. If he wants to snatch these people, why he doesn't just snatch them, or why does he even go the bother doing that? If he's all-powerful, why not just make duplicates of them instead of snatching the originals who will be disoriented? But anyway, the Beyonder snatches a group of a baker's dozen heroes and a baker's dozen villains and transports them to a world that he has created in order to get them to fight. He wants to know what will happen if they fight. And he promises, all your dreams will come true to the people who succeed, and they will also get to crush their foes and drive their women before them in lamentation. And if that sounds familiar to you, well, it sounded familiar to Jim Shooter, too, who really loved watching Star Trek reruns in black and white on a crappy old TV with antennas that you had to maneuver with your hands. And he remembers a Star Trek episode in which a godlike alien does the exact same thing. It's the exact same plot. A godlike alien pits Kirk, Spock, Abraham Lincoln, and Surak of Vulcan against four villains plucked from history, and they fight to see which is stronger, good or evil. It's a dumb premise, it's an easy premise, and it gives Jim Shooter, in the course of 12 issues, a chance to demonstrate beyond a shadow of a doubt that he can completely misunderstand every single Marvel character, good, bad, or indifferent. He even invents new characters in the course of Secret Wars that he can misunderstand. So our characters appear, and I want to show you the rosters so that you know what we're talking about. There is the roster of villains. You'll notice that out of those, well, you won't notice, but I'll tell you, out of those 13 figures, a full 6 of them have Asgardian-derived superpowers. A full 6 of them get their powers in some way or other from Asgard. There's the Enchantress, who is actually an Asgardian immortal and possessed of vast sorceress abilities, and yet she's plucked out of Asgard without so much as a by or a leap. There's the Absorbing Man, and there's the whole of the Wrecking Crew. All of them have Asgardian-derived superpowers. But the Absorbing Man can absorb anything that he touches, the qualities of it. The Wrecking Crew is just a bunch of bruisers. They're super strong, but that's all. Same thing with the Lizard, Spider-Man villain called the Lizard, who is semi-bestial and is roughly strong, roughly Spider-Man's level of strength, and also Dr. Octopus, who has, mechanical arms, so he's pretty strong with those mechanical arms. You have Kang the Conqueror lurking back there, and Doctor Doom. You have a character called the Molecule Man, who has the superpower to rearrange. He has control over all molecules. In other words, it's not the Beyonder who's God; it's Molecule Man. But at this particular time, he's undergoing therapy to try to be a good guy. And there's Ultron, a killer robot. You'll know a lot of these characters from the Avengers movies. Ultron is a killer robot who has an adamantium body, so his body is made of the toughest material known to man. So its body is indestructible. He has all sorts of energy-generating circuitry inside that body. And looming in the background behind all these characters who knock off banks and hold embassies hostage is Galactus, one of the most powerful characters in the Marvel Universe, who devours planets in order to live. Galactus does what Galactus must. He's here too. So you've got the Lizard and Galactus were chosen by the Beyonder to represent evil. And then we have a cast of heroes as well. Let's see how big we can make this. There we go. That is our cast of heroes. Considerably more heroes than there are villains, and we have the standard roster. We have the Fantastic Four minus the Invisible Woman. So we have Reed Richards, the Human Torch, and the Thing. We have Spider-Man. We have the Avengers, that is Captain America. Captain Marvel, that's Monica Rambeau, who's almost godlike in her own way. She can control and manipulate and become anything on the electromagnetic spectrum. But the other Avengers are the Wasp. You've got the Wasp there. You've got She-Hulk, Hawkeye. You've got the X-Men. That's Nightcrawler and Colossus and Rogue and Professor Xavier in his wheelchair, and Wolverine and Cyclops and Storm with her mohawk. You have Iron Man and Thor. And these are the heroes that are brought on board. And this is like page 2. So it's only page 2 before we get Jim Shooter misunderstanding people. Because Reed Richards stretches his body up in order to look around at where they are and then says, "This much I can tell you, Captain Marvel. This device apparently caused subatomic particle dissociation, reducing us as we entered to protomatter, which it stored until it teleported us here to preset coordinates in space, where it reassembled us inside a self-generated, life-supported environment." And the Hulk, who at this point in Marvel's continuity has Bruce Banner's science mind, he's not just a beast, says, "That's obvious, Richard." And what does Iron Man say? "Obvious? What do you say?" Because the Iron Man who knows how to build a super sophisticated piece of armor and who's a techno genius, well, Jim Shooter didn't have enough time to really study up on him. These are our heroes. And you can see right away, the Beyonder, you can see the problems right away, aside from the mischaracterization. The Beyonder is wants to pit forces against each other, good versus evil. And okay, you can look at this and you can say, all right, well, Professor X is here and he can control the minds of all the bad guys except maybe Galactus or maybe Ultron, who doesn't have, technically speaking, a mind. But you don't have Doctor Strange, who could do pretty much anything that he wanted if he were here. You don't have him. And are you looking to match power for power? Is that what you're trying to do? Your bad guys include Galactus. But your good guys, well, you've got Nightcrawler instead of, for instance, the Valkyrie, who's yet another Asgardian and almost as powerful as Thor. She isn't here. And there are a bunch of other characters as well. You start immediately to think, it's a question that came up in our last comic book discussion. If you're going to assemble a cast of characters to do something like this, inevitably you are going to want the most powerful characters that you have. But writers never start out that way. But I'm pretty sure that it doesn't matter in this case. I'm pretty sure that Jim Shooter was simply told by the executives at Mattel, here are the characters we want you to use. You can throw in a few extras, but these are the ones we want. The heroes and the villains find out where they are. They figure out what the challenge is. The Beyonder tells them you have to fight each other, and the victors will have everything that they want. And there proceeds a battle. It doesn't happen right away. They get their bearings first and learn all about these buildings, where they are. They get their surroundings. And there's quite a bit of infighting between both groups. The villains don't trust each other. Obviously, they don't know what Galactus is, and Ultron doesn't care about humans at all. He's willing to attack anything that's human. And you've also got Doctor Doom in the midst, where you know that Doctor Doom is out for himself. You know that he is. In Michael's video, he refers to Doctor Doom as the greatest villain of all time. You'll have to forgive Michael, as sometimes he slips away from his handlers and makes statements like that. He called Doctor Doom the greatest villain of all time. And off to the side, off camera there at Stately Vaughan Manor, you can practically hear Lex Luthor saying, "What am I, chopped liver?" But both the villains and the heroes have a bit of infighting. A big part of the infighting that happens on the part of the heroes is a figure that I didn't name. You can just barely make him out in the background behind She-Hulk. That's Magneto. The oldest and most fearsome enemy of the X-Men by anybody's measure at this point in 1984, a villain. And yet, for some reason, he is grouped with the heroes. Magneto is himself mighty powerful. There's virtually nobody on the villain side that he can't seriously inconvenience or instantly kill. You have to keep in mind, the villain side goes all the way down to Doc Ock and the Lizard. just utterly ridiculous. But Magneto defends himself in the course of the squabbling amongst the heroes. He says, I may not be, a crusader going out with the Avengers, but I am not a villain. And that's a rift right there. There's, of course, a rift between the good guys and the bad guys. There's also a rift between the avaricious bad guys, the bad guys who are merely avaricious, and the bad guys who have other motives, who have other games to play. Like, for instance, Ultron, who just wants to kill everything. Or Galactus, who senses that the Beyonder might be powerful enough to rid him of the hunger that causes him to eat planets, that give him peace. He's looking for peace. He's 500,000 times more powerful than all the other characters who are brought along with him, and if he can be brought along with him, well, then it begs the question of why other characters on that power level weren't also brought along. But you also, on the villain side, you also have Doctor Doom, who thinks bigger than the other villains. But nevertheless, the presence of Galactus really, really balances this whole story. If the Beyonder is pulling forces together in order to fight good versus evil, well, first of all, Marvel Comics has made it clear since Galactus first appeared that he is not simply evil. And second, if you're powerful enough to move him around like a piece on a chessboard, then why summon the Enchantress from Asgard instead of Odin? Why not summon Zeus from Olympus? Why not summon Dormammu, for Pete's sake? Why summon the Lizard if you're looking for a contest? But nevertheless, the heroes take their bearings before a series of fights happen. That's all that this series is, really. It's just a series of fights and backstabbing. For the first issue, you get a semblance of Mike Zeck artwork. You get a semblance of it. He can be a very good artist, but he has to be carefully inked. He doesn't draw backgrounds. He doesn't draw much in the way of panel-to-panel continuity. And he doesn't draw much past his lunchtime. So if you sign Mike Zeck on for a 12-issue miniseries, you know you are not going to get 12 issues of his artwork. You know that. And that happens in Secret Wars. I'm sure that he was contracted and he just failed. He just doesn't do it. The artwork is okay in the first couple of issues and then goes right down the crapper until Mike Zeck comes back, and then you're thinking, okay, well, now we're back in business. But no, he's terrible. He comes back in name only. part of the stock taking that the heroes do is interesting in a way. There are moments of it that are interesting in a way. The characters reflect, for instance, on the fact that they have been plucked out of their lives back on Earth and miss them, and maybe want them back and wonder if they ever will get back. This is a time in the continuity where Reed Richards' wife, is pregnant with their second child. Reed, of course, is distracted. He doesn't want to be where he is. There's another moment that is really neat. I wish that it had been played up a little more. Shooter hits on it twice in the course of 12 issues. The world that they're on is totally artificial. The Beyonder has made it out of scraps of other worlds. And sometimes it is racked by titanically horrible weather, gigantic storms that would strip the flesh off anyone. So they have to huddle in. The heroes and the villains have to huddle inside their compounds, except for Thor, who is shown in one great Mike Zeck panel as grinning from ear to ear. He is standing outside their dome, reveling in the storm. It's a wonderful Thor moment. It's one of the only wonderful moments in this whole thing, this whole mess. And there is a reflection by other heroes on that moment. Iron Man and Captain Marvel talk about it just a bit. Iron Man at this point had roller skates that generate power for his armor. And he says, in that wind, the raindrops must hit like 44 magnum slugs. The thunder alone would kill a normal, unprotected man. Tell me, woman, how can Thor survive that? And Captain Marvel says, he's tough. And Iron Man says, he's a card-carrying thunder god, right? Isn't he, like, in charge of the weather? Why doesn't he stop the storm? And Captain Marvel says, I think he likes it. He's probably encouraging it. And Iron Man says, encouraging it? And he says, no way, babe. My armor's built-in jets. She tells him to hurry up. And he says, my armor's built-in jet skates can't keep up with your light form even at your lowest speed. I'll check out the next level. Which is kind of an interesting moment. Of course, it's hampered by a couple of things. Number one, Iron Man would surely know that about Thor. Monica Rambeau has known Thor for about an hour. Iron Man has known him for years. And also, Iron Man seems to be having trouble understanding that Monica Rambeau has a name. He calls her first woman and then babe. Don't blame Iron Man for this case. I know that Tony Stark is later portrayed as a diehard philanthropist or playboy. But the sexism here is all Jim Shooter. Believe you me, it's just mapped onto Iron Man temporarily. There are, like I said, once the villains and the heroes get the lay of the land, there are huge fights. The battles that rage back and forth. There are also a couple of smaller fights that are quite funny. Jim Shooter, he's probably mellowed with age, but at the time that this book came out, and for a long time before it and a long time after it, he's extremely talented. I know I'm not making it sound that way, but if a toy company is handing you a burlap sack of money, how much talent can we expect to see? Anyway, but he can be talented in a gimmicky kind of way, and I think it was pretty clear that he didn't really like the stratospheric popularity of the X-Men, because he gives them a dressing down not once but twice in the course of these 12 issues. The first one, the one that all fans remember, is that Spider-Man happens to hear the X-Men he happens to overhear them saying, well, the humans here in the heroes group don't trust us. Let's ally with Magneto. At least then we're all mutants together. And Spider-Man doesn't like the sound of that and attacks the X-Men out of nowhere. Incapacitates Professor X, knocks him unconscious, and then beats the rest of the X-Men, Nightcrawler, Rogue, Cyclops, Colossus, with ease. He beats them with ease. And then swings away, flees before Professor X can wake up again. I never really understood that. I've never really understood why so many Marvel writers think that Cyclops would miss you. He doesn't have a ray gun, right? The energy beams that come out of his eyes are coming out of his eyes when he looks at you. If he can see you, he can hit you. And yet he misses Spider-Man over and over again. It's kind of strange. And of course, Wolverine is easily beaten, as he would be, since Wolverine is a normal guy who has razor-sharp claws coming out of his fists and who can heal really fast. And Spider-Man is not a normal guy. He's 10 times faster than a normal person and can lift 30 tons over his head. So it would be easy for him to beat Wolverine, and in this case he does. In 2022, that would never happen, never in a million years. Jim Shooter was very much an adherent of the old days where, in Marvel continuity anyway, but also in large part in DC continuity, sure, there were a lot of Legion stories that showed that if a character is established as being 10 times more powerful than another character, then they are. It doesn't matter how popular they are. It doesn't matter their relative popularities. It still means that Spider-Man can easily defeat Wolverine. That has gone away. In Marvel and even in DC, to some extent, that has gone away. Now, power levels are sort of, if you're a superhero, then you must be, equally powerful. You must all be equally powerful. Unless, it's a case of Batman versus Superman. But if it's Superman and some other superpowered character, it's all the same. I'm not a geek. I got into comics in order to lecture people about their politics. So I don't know about the details here. And that has bled over into the movies. Right? In for instance, the DC cinematic universe, is Wonder Woman stronger than Aquaman? Looking at the movies, you would have no way of knowing. They are portrayed as exactly the same. In fact, Wonder Woman is 1,000 times stronger than Aquaman in the comics. That wasn't true here. And Shooter has Spider-Man just school the X-Men. And then later he has the Wasp school the X-Men as well. And I'm not saying that it's unrealistic. The Wasp is a battle-hardened fighter. She knows how to fight superpowered beings, and her abilities, her particular combination of abilities, speed, tactical awareness, the ability to shrink down to insect size so you can't see her coming, and really powerful energy blasts, make her pretty formidable. She could probably take out most of the X-Men before they could even stop her, before they could even figure out a defense. But you have those inner fights, and you have some inner fights between the villains as well. A memorable sequence where Ultron decides, well, I don't really know what's going on here, but I know you're all humans, so I'm just going to try and kill you all. And Galactus just snuffs him out like a candle. And there are a bunch of other things, too, that happen. There are many, many developments with Doctor Doom that are toy dictated. Mattel had a suit of armor that they wanted for Doctor Doom, and it was not armor draped in green cloth with a hood over his face. It was something different than that. Shooter just had to build up to that difference. This miniseries is also famous for, among other things, introducing the black symbiote costume for Spider-Man. For the first time in 40 years, Spider-Man got a costume change into an all-black costume that was semi-alive. It clung to him. He could summon it at will. It did all sorts of things that his normal costume didn't do. And first seemed like that was just a neat idea. That carried over into the Spider-Man book. And it was a bit of time before somebody thought that maybe there's a big storyline there that might be worth investigating, and that gave rise to one of Marvel's most popular characters, a character far more popular than Spider-Man, which is Venom. But those things only carry you so far. If that's all you've got, then you don't have much, and you don't have much in the course of this miniseries. You really don't. This is largely junk. And it gets worse with every issue as it goes along, to the point where, by the end, you couldn't care less what happens, whether or not these people ever get back. Some of them do. Ben Grimm famously doesn't for a little while. Whether or not anything changes in the continuity of the books once you get back, once these heroes go back through those little doorways. Once you introduce a character like the Beyonder to the Marvel continuity, what can you do? Where can you go from there, and how can you get back from there? There is an attempt. There was a sequel to this called Secret Wars 2 that was... if this was bad, it was staggeringly bad. And there was also an attempt to address what the Beyonder is in a Marvel series called The Illuminati, which I'm hoping Michael and I get to at some point. It was a rather ingenious idea that was put forward there in one issue of The Illuminati about what the Beyonder is. Is he God? Or is he something else? Is he something far more material? But this could have been a really good idea if it hadn't been done on the cheap and on the quick for toy money. If it had been thought out properly, what would happen if some godlike being pitted the forces of good in the Marvel Universe against the forces of evil? Obviously, you wouldn't have Galactus in that mix, and you would mix in a whole bunch of characters who aren't present here on either side. But it is a pretty good idea. And it doesn't happen here. And the one thing that might be able to save this, consistently A-game Mike Zeck artwork, also doesn't happen here. So Michael Dunn picked a dud. Secret Wars is not worth your time. If you were to go buy a little free library and see a battered paperback of it for free, leave it there. Leave it for the bird poop. It's terrible. But who knows what we'll do next time? I don't. I have no idea what Michael will pill next. He tells me right before. He doesn't give me any time to prepare. I think because he suspects that I don't need much time to prepare for belly aching and stem winding. And maybe he's right about that. Anyway, that's your Comic Book Wednesday for today, all 10 of you. We did Marvel's Secret Wars, a bloated, horrible disaster of a thing where no one's in character for more than a minute. I'm going to wrap this up for now. Maybe we'll have something stellar next week. Or maybe something even worse than Secret Wars. Oh my, there's plenty out there. We shall see together. Thank you, BookTube.